Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv. Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, Vasili Gianarakos, my friend. How you doing?
Doing really good, Yariv. Lots to talk about, obviously, with the Flyers returning to action here and getting to go to the All-Star game. So we'll recap that before we get into the Flyers stuff. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing all right, dude. I'm doing all right. The Flyers are back on. It was weird. It was like a week and a half of no hockey.
Felt strange, almost like we're going into like a summer period again, but
Yeah. But I kind of needed it, to be honest with you, with the Carter Hart news, and just really bummed me out. I needed to like step away for a little bit. So I think it actually came like the perfect time. We had all these like roller coasters of emotions with the Gauthier trade and all this stuff. I think it was nice. It was a well
I'm sure
needed
the
break for me.
players feel the same way, to be honest, with
Yeah,
all the stuff surrounding the team, right?
yeah, dude, all the drama around the team, 5 game win streak, 5 game losing streak. It's like it was nice to decompress, to be honest with you. And we're going to talk about the All-Star game, but I did not watch a second of it. And didn't have any interest in watching it. And I just took a break from hockey, honestly, for like 9 days.
It's not a bad thing. Sometimes, you need to reset, just like the
Or
Flyers,
whatever, how
right?
many days. Yeah. I definitely needed it. So before we get started, just want to remind everybody, please like, subscribe, share, hit the bell for notifications. Make sure to follow us on Spotify and iTunes. Give us a rating on iTunes. Again, this stuff is a humongous help to us. So anything you're doing, if you're listening and you haven't subscribed yet, if you haven't followed us on one of the audio channels, all of that is immensely helpful. And again, more ratings on iTunes. I'll tell you guys that we have some trolling that was done in the very beginning. That's not anybody listening today. That was kind of brought down our ratings, but since then, I think we're at like a 4.1 out of 5 stars. So if we can get that up, that's a humongous help to
5 out of
us.
5 on Spotify. So thanks everybody who's
Yeah,
rated us there.
amazing. But yeah, iTunes, we got dinged a little bit in the very beginning. Got some 1 out of 5 star ratings. I don't think we're a 1 out of 5. Let's just say that. I can say you might be unhappy with our podcast. We might not be the best in your mind, but a 1 out of 5, that's like you stink.
Give us some leeway, give us some credit here. Come
I
on,
have
guys.
some theories, and it's before Vasili started, but we'll leave that out. And then somebody gave us a 3.5. There are 3 out of 5 stars because there are too many commercials. I cannot control commercials, so just so everybody's aware of that. That
We
is,
wish we could. We wish we
yeah,
could make no commercials for everybody, but
yeah,
it's all good.
yeah. But again, we don't really make much money off of this. This essentially just pays itself for the upkeep of the site. So we do this pretty much for free. So be aware of that. Give us some grace with the commercials. I despise commercials personally, so I empathize. But it is what it is. Yeah. And also just give a shout out to our sponsors, Gym Steaks at 4th and South and Public Summit Adjusters. You can reach them at 215-752-0560. Okay. Let's get into it. We'll open up with something that, again, I avoided, so I don't have too much to say about it, though. We were having an interesting conversation about it prior, so we'll dig into that a little bit. But the All-Star game, the good news about it is Vasili was there. He took a drive down over to the All-Star game, so we had some representation there. So Vasili, I'll let you open it up. And again, the winner of that was Team Matthews, if anybody actually cares. Konechny was drafted by Team McKinnon. Team
Yeah.
McKinnon. So, they didn't win. And I don't know if I would have cared if they did. But what would you think? What was your take down on ground level? And I know you got to interview Konechny, and yeah, give us a little bit of insight.
Interesting time, interesting event. Obviously, the All-Star game is something that hasn't been the most popular over the last probably decade, even maybe more than that.
Yeah.
So at least for me, I was able to get to the game on the Saturday. I didn't attend the draft or the skills competition. I did catch a bit of the draft on TV. I mean, I thought the production of it wasn't the greatest, unfortunately. There was like some mic issues, stuff like that. Maybe it's because they haven't done something like that in years at this point. It's been the first time in like I think over 10 years or close to something like that where they've done a draft for the All-Star game. So maybe kind of, working with some kinks there, working the kinks out with that. I did watch the skills competition and Connor McDavid essentially designed the new skills competition. So it was much different from last year's version in Florida. Some of the skills were really fast paced. I really liked the obstacle course that they did, showing off a variety of different skills of some of the top guys. I didn't really understand the fact that only really half the field participated in the skills competition. I figure, I mean, if you're an NHL All-Star, you should be able to participate in the skills. So that was just weird to me. I guess they wanted to put like the most skilled guys out there in that competition, but sometimes, other guys can surprise you with the types of skills they have. So I thought, why take away from that and take away from letting a guy surprise potentially? So I thought that was weird, but the skills were interesting and no surprise. I mean, Connor McDavid wins the competition that he designs. I don't know if that's cheating or anything like that, but
No, I think it just shows he's a freak of nature, that guy.
yeah, he's obviously like unbelievable talent, so it makes sense. And then getting down to the actual game, in Toronto, was really great. The atmosphere down there was great. The fans were really engaged. A really cool thing that I thought is they had these bracelets that they handed out actually to everybody in the crowd, and that's everybody in the press area as well. So when Tate McRae and Loud Luxury were performing before the game and during the intermission, the bracelets had like a kind of light up I guess technology associated with it. So basically with their performance, the bracelets would change different colors. So that was kind of cool. And that kind of brought like a fun atmosphere to it. But just in terms of the hockey in general, I mean, come on, it's 3-on-3 hockey. And at an all-star type game, you have guys trying stuff they wouldn't usually try. Like some of it was competitive. Like for example, McDavid's team versus McKinnon's team ended up going to like a shootout to decide. It was ended up getting tied. So there was some competitive nature to it, but I mean, it wasn't the best hockey you'd ever see, obviously, which is what you can kind of expect from an all-star game. But it was a fun atmosphere, really fun environment. Really cool to obviously interview Travis Konecny and get some questions in there. Essentially almost like a one-on-one because there weren't really a lot of media around to interview him aside from me. So I got to really get in a couple of good questions there. Kind of ask him a few things that are non-hockey related, just like his experience, enjoying it all, what he thought of the music selection, which he gave a fun answer to that. He was essentially saying when I asked him between Tate McRae and Loud Luxury, he's like, oh, I'm sure they're both great, which makes me think he probably hasn't listened to either one of them, which I thought was pretty funny.
I don't know who they
But
are, to be honest. I heard Tate McRae just because I saw pictures of her online, but
yeah, I know Loud Luxury just because they're from the Toronto area, but
okay.
Tate McRae, I mean, I wasn't really aware of her until this event. But hey, it just shows how nice of a guy Konechny is to kind of give that answer. But he's really laid back and just really easy to talk with. And one thing that I picked out that I also asked was more kind of Flyers related near the end of the interview there was just what his thoughts were on the break. And he's essentially said it came at the perfect time that the team really needed a break due to the schedule in January and some guys being banged up and things like that. And then coming out of the break now, you can kind of see that he was right just based off their performance against Florida. So overall, All-Star game was, a really good time and really good experience to go to, and just want to thank all the Flyers Nitty Gritty supporters because without your support we wouldn't be able to go to events like this, get
Well
you this
said.
type of inside coverage. So we appreciate it. One critique I have of the all-star stuff, I think it's time to stray from the 3-on-3, maybe go back to 5-on-5, or maybe you can keep it 3-on-3. But we were talking about this earlier off the air that I think there needs to be some stakes put into place if you really want to get these guys maybe in a competitive nature, maybe have the winner take home ice. So have like the Eastern Conference face the Western Conference. Whoever wins gets home ice in the Stanley Cup final. Maybe the NHL doesn't want to put something so crucial on an all-star game, but maybe that's how you get it to be more exciting and get more fans involved and
Well, I think it's
more
the
into it.
players more into it too, right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly. That's the
they're
main thing,
competitive,
probably.
but they go into it like it's extremely
You
casual.
don't want to injure yourself or anything
Yeah.
like that, right?
Yeah, I like what you said about I think East versus West is not as strong as a competition though, as and even though I like your idea, as when you mentioned this before we went on too, is the worlds versus North America. I
Yeah.
think maybe that has a little bit more, or maybe they do, some kind of like you need to create some kind of actual like excitement around this game. There really is not like for like John Tortorella says he doesn't care at all about this game, right? He's obviously not going to care, but I should be caring a little bit, and they
Yeah.
don't. Like it's almost like maybe they do the young stars versus the all stars. That was like some of the most interesting hockey games. Like maybe they do like an age
Yeah, some
thing.
guys want to prove themselves. They, put it all out there against some of the best players in the world. I could see something like that
Yeah,
working.
like the they probably would get their asses kicked. Maybe that's the problem. It worked. It
Yeah.
worked back in the day because the Young Stars team had McDavid and Matthews. But they could try to do like a 24 and under type of team, versus 25 and up. Maybe that's a recipe, but they got to try to figure something out because even looking at the just the TV ratings, the All Star game ratings are down 7% from last year. So
And those ratings last year weren't high as well. So
right, exactly. So the All Star game is not. Again, I think I said this last time on the podcast. A lot of the All Star game is for the city itself.
yeah.
It's for the people on
Also the
hand.
young fans, right? There's tons of
Yeah,
young fans at this game. They're having a
exactly.
great time and really
They get
enjoying
to
it.
see the players they
Exactly.
don't normally see. But having said that, it's like it's not real hockey. Everybody knows it. It's like the Harlem Globetrotters type of thing.
Yeah.
That's not what hockey's about. Hockey's about intensity,
Well,
physicality, and all of that is removed in these All-Star games.
I believe next year they're supposed to take a break from it. I think there's going to be some
Oh, they're
return,
gonna
like,
do the World Championship tournament or
yeah,
whatever.
exactly, like the World Cup. So that also got announced over the break. There's going to be a return to international play coming up here in the next, set of years. That'll be really interesting.
No
But
Russian
obvious,
team.
yeah, but obviously without Russia, you have to look at the actual competition and say, okay, is this really a legitimate competition if you don't have one of the best hockey
You know,
teams also participating? So.
I'll say this. I am not a fan of Russia. I am not a fan of Vladimir Putin. Okay. My father was Moldovan. And if you guys have been following the news, Moldova is invaded by Russia. I don't like Russia. My dad didn't like Russia. He ran away from Russia when he was a child, from the USSR, the collapse. Okay. I'm not a fan of Russia. But the whole point of sports is to be above
Yeah,
this
best
stuff.
on best competition, right?
Yes, it's to look. This is how you. I'm not gonna say end wars, but this is how you keep things civil in times of war, right? That's why the Olympics existed to begin with. It was to show competition amongst countries that normally were at war with each other, and for some reason, we're making an exception against this one country where there have been issues with every. I just do for the life of me, I do not understand why it has anything to do with sports. I really do not get why it was injected into hockey, why it's affecting young hockey players who are not even old enough to be in the military, like who are not
Yeah,
involved in
they're
this
not
stuff at
involved,
all.
right? You're punishing them, so
Yeah, like I get it. They're trying to punish Russia.
of
I get
course,
it.
yeah.
I understand where their thought process is, but what are you doing? You're not affecting Russia. You're not doing anything to their economy. You're not doing anything to their military. It's fake. It's fake. And you're punishing, quite frankly, Russians that are here, that are American citizens, a lot of them. Like, it doesn't make sense to me, or Canadian citizens, right? It's like, it doesn't make sense to me. It's like you're supposed to be above the world issues, right? You're supposed to be able to compete. Remember, the
Yeah.
Flyers faced the Russian army team. Like we allowed that to happen in a time that was very tense. Like I do not understand this thought process. I think it's extremely immature, and
Yeah.
I don't get it. It just seems like a seems like politics has entered sports, and that's the last thing you want to enter sports. Politics. Just look at everything that's happened every time they've tried to inject politics into sports. Like it's backfired immensely. I just do not understand it. Like if anything, do Russia versus the NHL All Stars. Maybe then people will watch. That's actually not a bad idea. KHL All Stars against
Versus
the NHL.
NHL All-Stars. That'd be interesting to see. I'm sure a lot of people would tune in to see that.
Yeah,
But yeah, just in terms of best on best hockey, it's kind of hard to say it's that type of competition if you don't have one of the best hockey nations competing. But
right.
hopefully by the time the NHL players end up going back to the Olympics because Bettman also announced that players would be or NHL players would be allowed to participate in the Olympics. Hopefully, Russia can potentially participate on the hockey side and at least make the tournament more interesting. But we'll see where it goes. Obviously, if all
Matvey
that.
Michkov would have been in that All-Star game. And again, Team USA just won that World Junior Championships. There's a chance they would not have won if Russia was in that tournament.
Yeah, they had
Like,
that stacked of a team, which we
yeah,
talked about with
Russia,
Steve.
arguably the best team on paper in that tournament. And again, like it almost puts like an asterisk on the tournament because they didn't play against all the best players in that age group.
Or
So it's
best
like,
teams, yeah.
yeah, I just think it's a shame. I think we need to be above that and allow competition to proceed even under times of war. Like it's one thing if Russia was just walking through other nations, just executing people in the streets. They're not doing that. They're at war with another nation. We've been at war with other nations. We as in the United States, I know you're a Canadian citizen, we've been invading other nations. Again, I'm not even necessarily judging that, but we have been at war with other nations and not punished for it on the global stage, you know? So I'm just like, beyond
Yeah,
me, I'm like,
politics are a
that's what
whole
I don't
different
understand. It's like
scenario, right?
you're making whatever. It's not a huge deal to me. Like I'm not sitting here crying about it. I just don't get it. It just doesn't go into my brain process. Um, all right. Anything else to say on the All Star game? Otherwise, we'll move forward with a little bit of more bummer news, and then we'll get all in the Flyer stuff because that's what I really want to talk
No,
about.
fun time, and hopefully, I mean, we'll be able to go to one of these again down the line here.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So the next bit of news is another, well, not another, but it's just we have to talk about it because it's a big piece of news, but I'm in no way excited to talk about it. But Carter Hart has been officially charged, just so everybody's aware that's listening to this. The charges officially come in. Do not expect him back anytime soon. There are rumors. And I mean, as far as the NHL, I don't even know if he's going to ever play for the Flyers again, but don't expect him to be part of the NHL for at least there. We're hearing 2026 could be the court date. So again, that's a couple
Who
years in the
knows? The
future.
Ontario legal system, as somebody who lives in Ontario, moves at a very slow pace. So they say 2026, but as an Ontario resident, I say it could be 2027, 2028. Who really knows?
Dude, I don't know either. So yeah, that's hanging up there. So per Chris Johnson, the London Police Chief Ty Trong, sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, announces that the charges against the members of the Canada's 2018 World Junior Team are as follows: Dylan Dubé, 1 count of sexual assault; Cal Foote, 1 count of sexual assault; Alec Fermenton, 1 count of sexual assault; Carter Hart, 1 count of sexual assault; Michael McLeod, 2 counts of sexual assault. Again, I don't really know what to make about this. I'm reading stuff on the internet that the amount of time in between cases, could be an issue for charging them. The one thing is, I'll say this, just like I don't like politics, the court of public opinion means absolutely nothing to me. At least personally. I'm sure it means something to them. I'm sure it means something to the Flyers and the organizations involved in the NHL and everybody. I am not involved in this. So to me, I don't care about what people's opinions about this is at all because until there is proof in the end and they're charged and I can't say anything because if they're not charged in the end, what do we do with that? So my whole thing is just to stay out of it and to unfortunately let the news come out in the maybe distant future.
Yeah.
I don't really know what to make of it beyond that. Go ahead.
Really,
Go ahead.
it's not any new news, right? Like this press conference from the London police didn't bring up any new news.
No.
Essentially just reiterated a lot of what we already knew. They officially charged the members of the NHL here that might have participated in this, that they think participated in this, but there's no actual, there's no actual verdict until a trial is gone through here.
It-
So we don't want to make assumptions and really, give our opinions on what could unfold, what could happen. Essentially, I mean, it's really a wait and see situation based on what's going to happen in the trial. And I would expect that no NHL team is going to want to touch any of these four players of Dylan Dubé, Cal Foote, Carter Hart, Michael McLeod, even Formanton, who's not really an NHL player. But I would expect no team is going to want to touch any of these guys with the 10-foot pole. And that's just the nature of things like this. They're not going to want
Yeah.
anything to do with them. And yeah, like we said on previous episodes, right? I mean, if a terrible thing like this was to happen, we want, justice for the victim here. But like we said, we're not involved. We're not in the rooms where this occurs. We don't know what happened because we weren't there. So it's hard for us to really make any statements or any judgments because we aren't,
Do you
privy to the information. So
Did they mention anything about the victim, alleged victim, whatever you want to call her, about her being subpoenaed? Because I know I mentioned this to you prior to recording. My roommate, so those who are listening, my roommate brought up an interesting point. I don't really know what to make of it. Again, I'm no legal expert, nor do I have a strong opinion on this. But he was like, well, he's like, if she gets subpoenaed and there was a settlement, does she have to like give up the settlement money?
yeah, I'm not,
Because isn't that what the settlement agreement would have been?
I don't know if there's like you can have clauses in an agreement like that that might forego you like reopening this if it was to become
Yeah,
criminal. I have no idea. I mean, I'm not a legal expert unfortunately,
me
so I don't
neither.
know, but it's definitely an interesting thought that your friend brought forth for sure. Um One interesting thing about this all that I just want to mention that's more hockey related.
Yeah.
This was a tweet by Darren Dreger that the Philadelphia Flyers, New Jersey Devils, and Calgary
Oh
Flames have
yeah.
been
Should have mentioned this.
informed they will receive cap relief for the
This
players
is the
on
most
leave.
important thing, actually, to us.
Yeah, so basically what Dreger's getting at is these teams involved will receive cap relief for the players on leave charged with the 2018 World Junior Criminal Proceedings here. And essentially what people are thinking and what rumors are saying online is that um, it might be used like LTIR, this cap relief.
Sure.
So teams would accrue the cap space from the relief as time goes along. So that could potentially be a benefit for the Flyers, just if they're ever looking to maybe acquire a replacement for Hart for this season, potentially. They don't decide to go with Cal Peterson as the backup in the long run. Or just if they're looking to maybe maximize and weaponize their cap space, right?
Well,
They'll have a lot more cap space with him potentially going on an LTIR or something similar to that. So with that cap space, we've seen Danny Briere take back contracts for assets. So who knows if the Flyers end up doing things like that with the cap space that they end up accruing. But we'll see how where it goes. But that's the main hockey related piece of this all.
yeah, especially teams like if we are going to trade somebody like Sean Walker, right? You know, you eat half his contract for the remaining of the year. You know, his you might get that first round pick that you want
Yeah.
because that team might be up against the cap, have no choice. That's the best player they could get.
Yeah.
So something to think of.
And you might have not been able to do that if you didn't have that cap space, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, be honest with you, I don't really think they needed it, but it could definitely be a benefit. We'll see what happens. I don't expect the Flyers to add anybody,
yeah, me too.
a goaltender either. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I don't see unless maybe I guess it could be like a Felix Sandstrom swap,
My
like a
only
goalie
thought
for a goalie.
Maybe. My only thought too is, I mean, God forbid, but if Sandstrom or Peterson get injured, you're going to have to get one. So
Well,
you
that
never know.
yeah, no, you might be right about that. I do have a topic at the end. We'll bring it back around, but I do want to talk about possibilities of another player coming over. But we'll talk about that at the end of the podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
But I was just thinking about that, like when we traded Stolars for Cam Talbot, right? Like here's a young goalie for give us one of your veterans, right?
Yeah,
Because we know
exactly.
Sandstrom's not coming back or whatever, right? Maybe he's going back to Sweden. Maybe he won't go if he has a chance with a new team. Maybe that's an opportunity to bring in a veteran from a team that isn't making the playoffs, right? Like
Somebody
that.
more established.
Yeah,
Exactly.
somebody on an expiring deal that the Flyers, maybe not even expiring. Maybe they Flyers consider him to be the backup for next year, and it's like a veteran goaltender. Just an option. I just thought of that now. Could be. I mean, I think that's something I would try to do. Um, yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. I'm glad you brought up the cap space part. I forgot to put that on here. I think it's nice at least that the teams don't have to suffer anymore. You know, that they're giving them the leverage there. Um, that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Anything else you want to add on that situation?
Yeah, just we'll see how it unfolds, right? Like we were saying, we're not really privy to all the information, and nobody is, so you can't really make judgments here until it all plays out. So
Yeah,
that's my thought process.
100%. That's why I said I'm not interested in getting into Twitter arguments or listening to Twitter experts tell me who's guilty, who's not guilty, who's lying, who's not. I have zero
Yeah,
interest in that.
we'll wait till the trial happens, and that's where it'll really unfold, right?
Yep. Yeah. That's the only thing I can recommend to people who listen to this podcast. All right, let's get into the good stuff. I'm tired of talking about this. So on the good news, the Flyers crawled into the All-Star break on a 5-0 loss, or a five game in a row losing streak. Ooh. Some ugly losses within there as well. Not didn't start off that way. Started off pretty competitive, but it felt like they were spiraling a little bit. We mentioned how they needed it. And the Flyers had a big win against one of the best teams in the NHL, one of the most high-powered offenses in the NHL, a team that averaged 35 shots a game. The Flyers held the Florida Panthers to just 21 shots in that game. I believe 7 shots in the final 2 periods. Again, the Panthers came out red hot. They were all over the Flyers. Flyers came out sloppy, not aggressive. A lot of people were worried, just as I was, that the trend was continuing. Again, I wasn't jumping to that, but you saw it and you're like, ugh, this is not, the way we wanted them to come out. Though, again, they're an away game. They're rusty. Their opponent is rusty, but their opponent's at home, and they're a very talented team. But the Flyers luckily got some fantastic goaltending from Sam Ersson in that first period. He wasn't as tested throughout the rest of the game, but in that first period, he was a difference maker. And if he did not make those key clutch saves, the Flyers might have not won that game because it might have been out of reach. And even with their performance in the subsequent 2 periods after that, they only had 2 goals. So it's not like they lit up the Florida Panthers and Anthony Stolarz, former Flyer. But I thought it was really great to see. Again, a beautiful goal by Travis Konechny, a beautiful goal by Noah Cates, who has been really, really cold. He got the game winner in that one. His first goal, and I think it was 21 games.
22 games,
22
yeah.
games. Thank you. So just a really solid performance defensively, really solid. Nick Seeler was a +2 with 6 block shots in that game. I thought the way they responded after that first period, that's the Flyers we know. We want them to come out stronger. They've been better early on. I think this win will probably get them right back on track to where they were. It felt more mental than it was anything, and I felt like they got over the hump. So, Vasili, what do you think? What are your thoughts about a big win against a very impressive opponent? And then they got another one coming up the day this airs for people, or at least when most people will be watching.
Yeah, obviously a huge win. I mean, the Panthers are 5th in the NHL overall right now, so one of the best teams in the league. And it's a tough one for the Flyers, right? Like you're coming out of a break, playing one of the best teams in the league, on a 5-game losing streak. Like this is something where you could have easily lost a game like this. It could have
Yeah.
spiraled for you, especially after that first period, right? And the Flyers kind of do the opposite. They get outshot. I believe it's 10-5 in the first period last
Yeah, I
night.
think that's what it was.
And doing that and getting outshot in that way, that's not really
Yep.
the recipe for success the Flyers have had this season, right? Like typically they're the team that's out shooting their opponent. They're the team that's kind of generating more chances. And they weren't the team that did that in the first, right? That was Florida. So it could have been easy for the Flyers to go into that first and continue that poor play from, prior to the break and that first period into the rest of their game, but they didn't let it slip. And they really did a full 360, right? And kind of turned the dime on Florida.
180.
Yeah, 180, sorry, but did a full 180 and turned the dime on Florida there. But essentially, I mean, they got back to what made them successful throughout most of the season, right? Supporting each other defensively in their own end, playing as a 5-man unit. Like what I noticed with Florida specifically is they were really pressuring the Flyers big time very quickly in the first period. That's on their forecheck, right? Like they're really coming at the Flyers, skating at them, trying to get them to make mistakes, give the pucks up on turnovers, which the Flyers are having troubles adjusting to. But after they kind of got accustomed to it in the second period, they were able to use the Panthers being so aggressive to their own benefit and get the transition game going and the neutral zone game going. And that's something they've been using all season, right? That's been a big part of their success when they're able to, create quick ups from the defense to the forwards from their own end, through stretch passes, through that neutral zone play, through that quick transitional play. They've typically been successful, and that's kind of what they use to get the offense back up and running, and kind of take control of the final two periods of the game. But yeah, just before we get into the transition stuff, because I have some stats on that, I just wanted to mention this, that the Flyers obviously break the 5-game losing streak. So that puts them at 6-5 in their last 11 games played. With the win over Florida, the Flyers now have 9 wins over top 10 teams in the NHL this season. So that's a win, 2-0 against Vancouver, 4-1 win against Edmonton, 3-1 win against Carolina, 4-3 win against Vegas, 5-2 win against the Avalanche, 4-1 win against Vancouver, 2-0 win against Winnipeg, 5-1 win against Dallas, and a 2-1 win against Florida. And they play the Jets coming up here. So potentially, if they beat the Jets, it could end up being 10 wins over top 10 teams in the NHL. So it's showing, the Flyers, at least based on the sample size and the way they've been playing some of the top teams in the league, that they can hang with some of the best teams in the NHL right now.
And it shows that they're not a four-game team sweep if they do make the playoffs, right? That you're gonna have a challenge playing the Flyers. Like, they might not beat you in the end. Like, maybe it'll be, if they come in as the 8th seed, or they come in as a wild card spot playing against one of the top teams. Maybe they lose, but they're probably not getting swept. They just don't play that way. They're too. In fact, I would argue they are a team ripe for an upset, or upsetting the opposition that might be ranked above them. This is a John Tortorella team. They have done it before. And if they're healthy, I mean, again, they did have 2 very strong starters, but they now have Sam Ersson as the definitive starter. He has been a very good goalie this year,
He
despite
kept
what
them
is
in it in the first period.
right.
Right, without Urson in the first period there, I mean, it could have really got out of hand. And he also made some big saves late in the third when Florida was pushing. So he was just as big of a contributor to the win, really, as anybody on the team. And just to get into those transition stats I was talking about, this is from Mike Kelly, NHL on Twitter, and he always
Yeah.
has these really great stats about offense off the rush stuff. And essentially, the Flyers this season are 4th in goals off the rush, 1st in chances off the rush. So they're creating the most chances in the league off the rush. So it just shows how crucial that transition offense is. And when it's really rolling, that's when the team's at their best. That's kind of like we saw against the Panthers here. And another interesting stat too, and this is from NHL Network on Twitter, is for statistics on breakaways this season, the Flyers are 2nd in goals on breakaways this year with 13 goals, and they're 1st in the league with breakaway opportunities with 48 breakaways. And Travis Konechny leads the league in 5 breakaway goals. So it just shows that it's not just odd man rushes, right? They're getting breakaways, a lot of them, from this transitional play that they're putting forth, and it's really been benefiting them. And even Konechny, right? Like, he had a breakaway early in the first and got stoned on that by Stolarz, but then he had a kind of mini partial breakaway on him later on for the goal. And what a play that was, right? With Walker with the quick pass. Once again, another transition type play where Walker gets the ice up quickly to Farabee at the blue line. Farabee with a real nifty saucer backhand pass, and Konechny has a great finish to put a glove side. But for me right now, and the way the Flyers are playing, it just seems that when that transition game gets shut down, they have a lot of difficulties. But when it's rolling, they can be one of the best teams in the league and kind of compete with really any team. And it shows just the way they played Florida last evening. But I think Tippett's a real big part of that because you saw before the break, right? Without him, the team did look a little bit lackluster offensively. I mean, a lot of games in a short period of time that might contribute, but I think it shows how big of an impact a guy like Tippett can have on their transition game and their offense, because his speed adds an element to that transition. So without him, it really takes a facet of their offense away, allows those other teams and their defense to focus in specifically on Konechny, Couturier, Farabee. And when you can focus on 3 guys out of an offense, it can be very easy to shut them down versus when you have Tippett, it adds another layer and you can kind of split Konechny and him up. And there's a lot more that other teams' defenses have to worry about. And I think adding him back into the fold, the fact that he's not, significantly injured is going to be a big thing for the Flyers here over the final, 31 games.
Yeah, and this is a team that wins through depth, and it shows. I definitely think Tippett was a big loss for the team, without a doubt, especially the way he was playing at the time. I don't think that their losing streak came on just because of that reason. Like, again, they lost Sean Couturier and still won games without him,
Yeah.
but it definitely didn't help.
No.
It probably made the problem worse, right? They weren't playing their best hockey, and then they lost one of the guys who was playing his best hockey. So kind of took away from the confidence. And I think that's how we kind of got to that spiraling Boston Bruins game, where, the Bruins just look like another class of team. And I think the Bruins are a very good team. Do not get me wrong. But the Flyers are absolutely capable of playing better against them, regardless of how good David Pastrnak is. They just didn't play very well as a team. Like, that game could have completely run away from them in the first period. It wasn't that different than the Florida game, only the team played even worse throughout every period. And I actually said something incorrect. I said that they held them to 7 shots through the final 2 periods. It was halfway through the game they held them to 7 shots. So they did
Final 2 periods, they held them to 10 shots.
10 shots, right?
Yeah.
No, it was 11, wasn't it? 8 and 3.
Yeah, 11. So
11 shots.
Close enough. It's okay.
Yeah. Round down. Yeah, no, I feel you. So, I think overall it was a very important win for the team. They lost a lot of ground that they had a lot of cushion, and they lost that cushion with that 5-game losing streak.
Almost to get things back on track type of game.
Right.
But, when a team wins 5 in a row, like they did prior to the 5-game losing streak, you have to expect there's going to be some losses. But to your point, I think losing a guy like Tippett might have had a spiral instead of it being like 3. It ends up being 5, where if you have him in the lineup, maybe with the added depth, you squeak out like that win against one of those teams there, right?
Yeah, he brings out a lot of energy. And actually, going back to the game last night against the Panthers, I think actually the game-changing moment in that game was a hit that wasn't really talked about. But Travis Konechny sent somebody flying last night. I don't even know who the player was.
I saw.
If you rewatch it, yeah, you saw the hit because the guy went like flying, like complete horizontally in the air. It was like in the background of the play. After that, I remember like thinking specifically like, oh, that's exactly what we needed. And we were just missing that tenacity that we had in the other games. And the team turned it on after that. And, when you're not playing well, you need to play physical. And that's why I don't buy that size doesn't matter in the NHL. Like, none of that makes any sense to me. Still a very physical sport. And I think it's why the Flyers got themselves out of it.
Just to add, too, like I think Tippett also was just flying. Like, first game back from the injury, and obviously even extended time because there's a break, and
he took that penalty too.
And that penalty, he absolutely decked.
Too aggressive.
He absolutely decked the guy on that. And to be honest, I thought that was a soft penalty, but
I think it's because it was a dangerous position.
Yeah, he had the puck, kind of finishing your check, but 50-50. Like, if it's playoffs, I don't know if that's a penalty,
right?
But we'll see. But yeah, for him, like, it's just impressive to me that you miss that time and you come back. And to me, I thought he was their best player offensively, like him and Konechny, obviously, because Konechny gets the goal. Tippett unfortunately doesn't get a goal or anything, but he just had a ton of chances, and just looked dangerous.
Missed
and
the net on
really the speed. It's just the speed, right? Like, you notice that without him, not to say that the Flyers lack speed, but it's definitely evident there's an element of their speed that they're lacking when he's not in the lineup.
And to that point that you made about the All-Star game, would have Owen Tippett been competing in the fastest skater in the league competition? Probably not. And as we saw this year, I think he probably still holds the record for the fastest skate during a game. Again, you look at those breakaway numbers. The Flyers are not a slow team, and I've been saying this for a while. I don't really think they were ever really a slow team. I think they played slow. So it made them look slower than they are. But I think they're actually starting to move into that territory of having, a good amount of speedy players on the team that, in the near future, they might be one of the faster teams in the NHL. And it's something I would personally love. And I also think Noah Cates had a really strong second half of the game. Obviously, I don't think the first period anybody really played amazing. So it's hard to
It's more
I
getting
think
up
that,
to speed, right? It's
yeah,
like think about
Joe
when you
Farabee played well, TK played well in
I
that first
always
period.
think about this analogy, right? When you come back from a long vacation from work, are you your best in the 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. hour that you log on?
That's a
Probably
good
not,
point.
right?
Yeah.
So probably the same for the team, right? They're trying to get, the legs under them back into, game action. And then the second period, things really get rolling. But I think obviously Tortorella probably has a factor to play there. He gave the team a little bit of his peace of mind on the bench. I could only imagine what he said in the locker room. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think he definitely did. I loved seeing Noah Cates score a goal. I think his numbers do not reflect his potential offensive production. He had a much better offensive year last year. Again, missed a significant amount of time this year, and he wasn't scoring in a time period where the team wasn't rolling the way they are. They were still kind of building their identity early on, and he's kind of been relegated to like just a bottom six forward majority of the season. But I think if he can put up a couple more points, I think he's going to get moved up the lineup. I think, especially having him on the wing, you look at the way he scored that goal. Just
clutch.
yeah, it was clutch, but it was also like exactly what the Flyers need on the wing. Like, and he's very good at coming out of the corners, or just making that play where he uses his body to kind of hold on to the puck. He's got a really
Protect
strong
it. Yeah.
stick. Yeah, he's really good at that, and that's why I was like interested to see him play with Sean Couturier. I still want to see that because I think that can be one of the best shutdown lines in the league if you have a guy like Cates and Couturier on the same line.
Yeah, and a really
Uh,
good forechecking line too,
yeah.
because I mean, to your point, Cates is just great as the F1 and pressuring defensemen when they have the pucks, and also just being the F1 in on the forecheck if the Flyers choose to dump it in versus carry it in. But to your point, I mean, Cates really clutch goal, and I think the thing that stood out to me the most on it was not even the like amazing maneuver that he made to cut to the slot and score, but it was the fact that when Florida's defenseman turns it over, he's in the perfect position to corral the turnover and then create the chance. Whereas most other players, they wouldn't have the wherewithal, hockey sense, to be in that position to even get the turnover in the first place. I thought that was an underrated thing that kind of shows just how important the hockey sense can be for Cates in his game as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited to see Cates get rolling a little bit. We could use him beyond just his defensive game. I'd like to see him where he was last year because it would make the Flyers just such a more difficult team to play
Even
against, in
more
my opinion.
dangerous.
Yeah. More dangerous offensively. I think defensively, he's already there, but I think he can play better. I don't think we're seeing like the potential of what Noah Cates is. I think he's
Yeah.
going to be a late bloomer regardless, and he's just going to be one of those players. Probably when he hits around 28 years old, is going to be recognized around the entire NHL for being one of the most annoying players to play against. Um, I almost have no doubt about that.
It's kind of a fresh start for him too, Yariv, in the sense that like not a fresh start, more maybe fresh slate, but like coming off the injury, only really played a couple games before the break here, so it's almost like a new season, and it's almost perfect timing, I would say too, because it's not like he's jumping in, let's say like right at at the end of February and March when it's really the stretch drive. Like the whole NHL just got a break off or a week off, right? So this might be perfect timing to kind of jump back in when the rest of the league also was just
Yeah.
off.
You got to
Catch up.
play. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You got to play, warm up, and then take that break with everybody else and come right back in. I expect he's gonna have a much better second half of the season than he did the first half.
Agree.
Especially with the injuries and everything. I think I have predicted some of the line combinations by accident. And I think with that goal last night, I think there is a chance because it would be really interesting to see now. You have Farabee and TK who are having really nice chemistry. Again, Farabee's played well with everybody this year, but you think about that second line of Farabee, TK, and Frost. If they can develop to be like a consistent line together, and then you can because Sean Couturier has been cold for a little bit here, and then you can get Noah Cates maybe and Tippett with Couturier. I
Yeah.
like that. I like that. I like that top line, which is defensive heavy, but then has the explosive Tippett on there. And we know that the coaching staff doesn't think that highly of Tippett's defensive game, though I don't think it's been that bad or anything. But they're not
You can
high
really
on
let
it.
him loose there though with those two guys. So
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. Maybe it lacks a little bit of speed there, but I don't know. I think it's something that they definitely should explore.
It'll be interesting. We'll see, right, what they do, but
Yeah. So we kind of have just random topics after this. And then we'll do our second half of the not even half, the last like quarter or whatever of Phantoms and prospect updates. But I was kind of thinking about this because we were talking about Sam Ersson. We talked about potentially adding a goalie. We talk about the other guys coming up, and again, I do want to talk about Kolosov a little bit later. But what do you think about the Flyers drafting another goalie this year? I was kind of like, it's probably not going to happen. But I don't really know the rankings of the goalies this year. It's something we probably should ask Steve about. I'm sure we will talk to him about it when we get him back on in a little bit. But I was thinking about the odds of drafting another goalie. If we really do have 4 picks early on, in the draft in the first 2 rounds. Again, I don't expect either one of the first round picks to be a goaltender. But would the Flyers use one of their second round picks to draft a goalie? I mean, it's where they took Carter Hart. It's typically where you find the best goalies in the draft. They're typically taken either in the second, sometimes even third round. So they are available in kind of that window. And if they do have 4 picks, maybe they'll have more if they move Sean Walker. What do you think about the chance of the Flyers adding another goaltender? They already added a couple last year, but with the Carter Hart situation, which was up in the air, there is no definitive superstar in the organization. Technically, I would argue that probably isn't necessarily true. But I do wonder if maybe they take another jump on
yeah.
a goalie, even though Zavragin, and maybe I'll bring this up right now. I had something here from Appleyard. So Zavragin stopped 34 36 shots with a .944 save percentage shots today in a 4-2 win. He is 12-0-0 on the season in the VHL, a .944 save percentage. That's second in the VHL, 3 shutouts, and only 1 month left in the season. No goalie in in VHL history has ever gone unbeaten in 15 plus games.
Looks like he can stop the puck, huh, Yariv?
Yeah. So again, the Flyers are still loaded from a prospect pool in the goaltending department. But what do you think, Vasili? You think there's any chance that they
Um,
do go for another goalie? Maybe it depends on
hey,
who's available, but
I'm a
you think they're
goalie
in that
guy.
mindset?
I'm a goalie guy, so if you're gonna ask me, I'm always gonna say draft a goalie, because you never know how the goalies that you have in your system are gonna potentially turn out. They
Yeah.
might look like the best prospects ever and might come to the NHL and they might flop because that's what
Jack
happens.
Fucale is a
Yeah,
name that comes
that's
to
what's
mind.
happened with goalies. I mean, everybody remembers Justin Pogge a long time ago with the Leafs. Supposed to be one of the best goaltending prospects ever. Never played more than a season in the NHL, right? So things always happen. Jim Carrey back in the 80s, right, had one of the best seasons ever in NHL history. Then, wins the Calder and then falls out of the league only seasons after. So you never know what's going to happen with the goalie. I do like the fact that they have a good amount of depth, even with Hart, and the circumstances, right? Like you have Urson. Obviously, Pedersen and Sandstrom aren't like starter level depth, but it's some depth. But I'm saying more in terms of the prospects with like Kolosov, Zavragin, Bjarnason. Those are 3 legitimate prospects that have some upside. But that's only 3 goalies
Right.
technically, and
Exactly.
and you
Exactly.
have Sandstrom that might walk after this season. And you have Urs or Pedersen, who could potentially get bought out coming up here. So
Less
real
likely now, I think, with Carter Hart, maybe,
yeah,
but maybe I'm
exactly.
wrong.
But with that in mind, right? Like you actually don't have too much depth coming forward in your prospect pool. Like it on paper it seems like
It
it, but
disappears quickly
yeah,
somehow.
exactly. So I think it would make sense to, especially with the extra picks in this draft specifically, it would make sense to take a goalie here. I don't know how high they would. I guess it depends on who's available, who they like specifically. If they think the upside is worth, using a second round pick on, for example. But just because they don't take a goaltender in the second round doesn't mean that they're not going to take one later on. So I definitely think they could, especially with this recent news with Hart and all those circumstances. It only makes sense. You can never have too many goalies, especially with the fact that it's hard to predict the outcomes on who you've drafted with them. And it's also hard to predict just their trajectory in a sense that sometimes goalies aren't right till they're 26, 25, right? So It's hard to really say what potentially could happen, but it'll be interesting. I'm just going to read off here. I have the top 10.
Okay, I was just
We're
looking that up.
I have
Go
the
ahead.
top 10 worldwide 25 or 2024 NHL goalie prospects. So this is according to Elite Prospects. So they have Christian Kirsch, who's from Switzerland, ranked number one. He's in the National League in Switzerland, so that's a pro league. Noah Erliden, who's Swedish, plays for HV71 in the J20 League in Sweden. Nicholas Kempf, number three, who plays for the US and TDP. Gabriel Dagile, plays for the Victoriaville Tigers in the QMJHL. Petteri Rimpinen, who plays in the Mestis League in Finland. Simon Westling, another Swedish goalie, plays for the Vaho Lakers in Sweden. John Parsons also plays for the USN TDP. Chase Wutsky, who plays for the Red Deer Rebels in the WHL. VT Luhavara, who plays in Finland, and Jakub Malota, who plays for the Cape Breton Eagles in the QMJHL. So those are the top 10 prospects for goalies heading into the draft. So, maybe we see one of these names get selected here by the Flyers, but not to say I would expect it, but I definitely say like
I wouldn't
I
be
put it
shocked.
I put it like a 60-40 chance of potentially happening.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked, or at least maybe even a third round pick, because some of those guys will drop. Not everybody's going to take a goalie in the second round.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, Again, the Flyers moved up to grab Bjarnason last year. I just think that it's not a position you want to assume
Neglect.
that. Yeah, you don't want to assume you have it settled. You don't often find star goaltenders like
Yeah.
you hope that they are, but like you said, there's such wild cards. And again, we brought this up several times, I don't know, countless times, that most NHL goalies do not touch the ice till they're 24 years old. Sam Ersson is 24 years old now. He touched it at 23, but again, it was a long journey to get here, and nobody was certain that he was what he was, because you look at Sandstrom. He also was a really good young goalie. Like, if
In the
you look at,
Swedish league, yeah.
yeah, if you go back in the day, uh, I don't know, let's go like 4 or 5 years back. It wasn't clear cut that Sam Ersson was going to be much better than Sandstrom.
Yeah,
Like,
people thought Sandstrom was gonna be a
or at least,
legit NHL
yeah, they thought it would
goalie.
be
So
competitive, that they were closer in that range. Um, but Airson has just continued to get better and better. So I don't know. I just don't think it's something they could neglect. And now, it's one thing if you have Carter Hart signed long term and you have Airson here, and then you got Kolosov coming. It's like, okay, that's one story. But now without Carter Hart, and then your starter is relatively inexperienced, just like you don't want to be caught assuming that goaltending position is
yeah,
taken care of, because technically
especially
right now it's not. It kind of is. Like, I have a lot of faith in Sam Ersson. I really do. I
so
think
do
he's
I.
fantastic. But again, that's one goalie that you have faith in
You have to
right
have a
now
fallback, right?
at the
And
pro level.
yeah, you have to have a fallback, and you could say that maybe their fallback in a sense is Kolosov, but you still don't know. And it's hard, right, with goalies and even goalie injuries. You have a couple guys go down, and then the depth's really tested, and you
You
don't
got
know
a
what's going to
guy
happen.
taken away by the dictator of Russia. That
Yeah,
happens too. The
yeah. So
Flyers have the weirdest situation. The Flyers are cursed when it comes to goaltenders, and I don't really believe in that stuff, but Jesus
you might as
Christ.
well draft them because it
Like,
seems like it. So
okay, Ron Hextall was a legit number one goalie, okay, but he wasn't like a superstar, right?
no,
The
yeah,
Flyers have had two young superstar goaltenders in the somewhat modern era. Okay. One of them died. May he rest in peace, Pelle Lindbergh. And the other one is Carter Hart, who was just charged with
charged.
sexual
Yeah,
assault. So, like, don't take any chances. Double it up. It's unfortunate, but it's like, what can we really do? Now, again, I still feel pretty good about their spot in the goaltending position, especially considering the circumstances. Like, most other teams, if this happened to their starter, they are shit out of luck.
yeah.
The Flyers are not.
Yeah, and
They're
one
not
thing to
them.
factor in too that I will say about the goalies is just because this is more for the goalies that are in junior league still. Just because a goalie's really good in a junior league, doesn't mean that it's going to translate at the next level. There's tons of cases where a goalie will make the jump from, whether it's USN or a CHL team or, a lower level
It
tier
depends on the
team.
team that played in front of them too.
Yeah, exactly. Lower level tier team in Sweden or Finland where the goalie then makes the jump to the next level and it's really overwhelming for them in their game and things like that. So just because they've drafted goalies right now, they're tops of the league and currently they're in, doesn't mean it's always going to translate down the line. So I think that's why it's important to keep drafting because you never know, even though the goalie you picked looks great in the CHL right now, once it gets to the AHL, it might not be the same, right? He
You
might
know,
not have it. So
and
it's good to add to that pool due to that.
yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I think it's also important to realize, like, one thing I think about when I think about Airson, like back in the day, one, I got to see him in dev camp and stuff, and I liked what I saw from him a lot. Like, he looked like a technically proficient goaltender where I always looked at Sandstrom and saw, okay, this guy's got a lot of skill, but he wasn't that technically proficient. Like, his positioning wasn't as good as Airson's.
Relied more on the athleticism. Yeah.
And the other thing is Airson played for a really bad team. Like, he was getting worked nightly and was not giving up a bunch of goals. So I thought that was really impressive. And that's where I look at somebody like Bjarnason, where like the Flyers moved up to draft this kid. You look at his numbers, they're really pedestrian. Like they are not
His
impressive
team's
numbers at
bad
all.
too, though.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's like he's also getting kind of worked where he is. And again, goalies are long-term projects, but like finding goalies like that too that are like seem more like a diamond in the rough because it's not like Airson was like a top goaltender, in the world when he got drafted.
No, but
Um,
it's a smart tactic, right? You pick goalies that are dealing with adversity in their current situation. So
yeah,
then let's say when they get to the NHL level or AHL level, they're already kind of versed with that and know how to deal with that type of, play or adversity in front of them. So it's almost like a mental toughness that you're looking for when you're drafting in a sense, but
yeah.
it's definitely interesting to point that out.
I also want to say that while I've heard that goaltending has been an issue with the Phantoms, one, I don't fully buy it. Though um I do trust the people that have said that. I just don't fully buy it. And I will say, Cal Peterson, so far in a Flyers uniform, not Phantoms, has been okay. Like I haven't
It hasn't been bad or
he has
anything.
not been bad. Like, yeah, he's been thrown in some tough games where maybe he didn't look, he didn't save everything, but he still has a chance to save his career with this opportunity here. And if he can put together some games, it stops the Flyers from going out to finding another vet, and at least gives him an opportunity to play. And
Yeah.
he doesn't become an albatross contract,
There
even though he's clearly going to be overpaid regardless. But
there's
um,
probably a ton of
he's got a
motivation.
chance.
There's probably a
Yeah,
ton of motivation for Peterson here, right? Like I'd imagine he probably realizes this is his final shot, maybe to continue being an NHL goaltender.
yeah.
So I would bet that he's going to take it pretty seriously. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him play really well because he probably knows himself. Hey, if I don't play well during this stretch here, first off, the Flyers, might not give me a long leash. They might yank me out of there and put Sandstrom in, and then my shot's already down the drain. But if he doesn't play well at all, other teams are for sure going to notice. And when it comes to UFA time, when he is a free agent next year, if the Flyers buy him out or not, or even the next season beyond, I doubt many
There
teams are
might
going
not
to be lined up to sign him.
there
So
might not be even a contract available for him at the AHL level
that's what I
because
mean. So this could be his career on the line almost.
yeah. So you hope that the motivation is there, and I think he just needs maybe some things just to go his way, turn his career around. I never thought he deserved that contract to begin with. I think it was a stupid contract to begin with, to give the guy, but he was playing well enough to be an NHL backup, a solid one.
Yeah, of course.
So to get him back to that point, I mean, you think about Martin Jones, who everybody gave up on. He's revitalized his career too. It's like it's not disappeared from him. He's not an old man. It's not impossible. And we need him to do that right now. We need him to value his contract better than what it's at, because that's a guy that if he can be a solid backup for Airson, put up good games, he becomes a viable option to move next year at a 50% retain for the rest of his year, for the rest of his season. If the Flyers are not in a playoff
Yeah, if
spot or
teams need a
something,
goalie, yeah.
again, at 5 million, nobody's taking
But two and a
Peterson.
half.
two and a
Yeah.
half potentially, for a playoff run. Again, just with a cap hit at a $2.5 million cap hit, which is,
Just for depth,
smaller.
really.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So, and injuries and what that can always happen, but that might be more of a pipe dream. But I don't know. It's an opportunity now, but Airson is so vital to this team. So immensely vital to this team, and maybe in the long run we'll be looking back and be like, maybe this is some of the best thing. Maybe he'll end up being better than Carter Hart for all we know. I don't necessarily see that. That he is more talented than Hart, but he does have a very high ceiling for a goalie, and potentially can be, a top 10 goalie in the league. That I do see from him. Um, I don't see him being like the best goalie in the league, but we don't need him to be best goalie in the league. We just need him to be a damn good goalie. And so far, he's shown that he can be. And mentally, he's been very strong, and I think that's
he
impressive. So
bounced back really well, right? Like it was probably, I mean, arguably one of the worst stretches of his short NHL career
yeah,
with this losing streak going into the break. And he bounces back against, the Panthers that are fifth overall in the league and puts up a 952 save percentage against them. So
yeah,
that just shows the mental toughness essentially.
yeah. And again, top 10 goalie is no joke. Maybe he can be better than that. I'm open to it. The guy's got the skill. Um,
You just
you
have to
know,
see
I,
the track record, right, with the
right.
goalies.
I got to see more than 35 games of it. I mean, there are times where he looks so goddamn good, and then he's had a couple clunkers, which is okay. I don't think that reflects, like, with goaltenders, you have to really look at a long track record of
Yeah,
performance.
it's
It
the
is not
consistency.
right, exactly. And
That's what makes a top goalie a top goalie
well, how
is
many people
you.
gave up on Fleury and now he looks like a legend? Well, he is a
Yeah, of
legend.
course. But I was just gonna say, like, how many goalies are there that they can play good for a stretch or a little, duration of time, but if you consistently trot them out there, it kind of falls apart. And
Yeah,
that's where you kind of separate the lower echelon for the upper echelon. If you can play at that level, where you're saving the majority of the shots consistently on a night-to-night basis, that's how you get to be one of those top 10 goalies. And I think that's what we need to see with Urson if he's ever going to get to that point is, okay, you could do it in a 1B, 1A type situation like you were kind of in with Carter Hart previously before the charge, but can you do it now that you're the real number one starting essentially on an every night basis against all the best teams, right?
yeah, and he's gonna get a great opportunity to do that. He's gonna play majority of these games down the line here.
Yeah.
Torts loves him.
And they're going to
He
be big
believes in
games
him
against division rivals, against
against
basically
top
all the
teams.
teams.
Yep,
Exactly.
he's gonna be getting every most likely every top team we face is probably gonna be him.
Oh yeah.
That's not necessarily true. I'm sure Peterson or maybe even Ayerson will or Sandstrom will get some of those games against some of the better teams, but that'll, from looking at the least the month of February, there aren't really back to back games here, so it is an opportunity to overplay Ayerson, which they can't really afford to get him hurt. That's where it gets really dicey. Um, but we'll see what happens. The nice part about this season is the Flyers are playing on house money. You know, nobody expected them to be here. Nobody expects them to win the Stanley Cup. There's no desperation trades that need to happen. There are at least two pro goalies behind him. And again, this is why I didn't want to lose Sandstrom for nothing earlier. We didn't know what goes on with the goal. You never know what can happen. So
Imagine if you did lose him now and you really only had Peterson behind Urson and
and
Nolan Mayer.
Gahagan,
Yeah.
yeah, it would be Gahagan
Oh,
actually.
Gahagan. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Nolan Mayer hasn't even played. Gahagan's played well with the Phantoms. Arguably, he has better. Well, not arguably, he does have better numbers than Peterson and Ayerson. But whatever. Let's talk a little bit about trade deadline. So I just wanted to bring this up because I thought it was interesting. We brought up Scott Lawton on here,
He's on all these trade rumors after
and like
that. Look at
literally
what we
like
did.
2 days later, he was in every trade rumor.
Sorry, Scott. We didn't want to
Yeah.
start it off,
So,
but
and again, people have heard this name. This is not a revelation, but like I think Rasmus Ristolainen is the number one defenseman the Flyers are trying to trade, not Sean Walker. I think teams definitely want Sean Walker. I think he's the easiest to trade, but I think Risto is the one that they would like to trade.
do you think that's why they put him on the first pair with Sanheim last night? They're trying to showcase
Uh,
him a bit, or
Potentially, I don't think so. I don't think Torts makes roster decisions based off of trades,
No, of
but
course.
I just look at his contract, and if I was Briere and I look at contracts I want to get out of, where the team is, I want to get out of long-term contracts. Again, it's not that we have to get rid of Risto. We're not in a position where we have to get rid of him. That's a nice trade position to be in, right? Like when you're not backed into a corner with this guy, and if you can remove his salary, that opens up the door to potentially find somebody else to play with Sanheim who can maybe skate a little bit better. You want to they're probably keeping Nick Sealer. I'll be honest with you guys. Like, I really don't see the Flyers trading Nick Sealer. They might, but again, I think they're going to probably keep him. And I think they want to keep Sean Walker. I think they want to keep Walker and Sealer, go with Drysdale and York, and find a way to replace Risto. And
I
if
could see something like that because I mean, even when you look at the way this team plays, like look at that goal to connect he scores last night. Like you remove Walker, that play doesn't happen. So I think they
he's
do
been really good
realize,
here.
yeah, I think they do realize that he might have actually more value to this team if you could potentially re-sign him versus keeping Aristolainen. Maybe that's the swap that they're kind of
Because
trying to do here,
I
but
think you
we'll
can
see.
shine. I think you can get Sean Walker for 3 million, 3 years. To be honest with you, 2 years, 3 million, maybe 3.5. Like you can get him at a much bigger discount than what you're paying
Yeah,
Risto.
I think he likes his position here too, right?
Right,
Like
exactly.
Tortorella's kind of let him play his
Exactly.
game. He's
That's why I
found
think you
his
can get
game.
that's
So
why I think you can get the discount. I think if you were re-signing Risto right now, I think you could get him for less than what we paid for him. We could have got him for probably
yeah,
four
well,
million.
Chuck Fletcher School of
And
Negotiating
and
once again.
that's exactly why I think the Flyers would take an opportunity to move his contract, because I think they'll look at it and be like, look, we don't want to get rid of him. He's not a problem for us in any kind of way. But there are teams out there that are gonna want this big 6'5" defender who can block shots, who's improved his defensive game, who has a little bit of offensive upside, who's
Yeah,
mean and nasty, would definitely help us in the playoffs without a doubt. He would be
I
valuable to us in
think
the playoffs, but I think we'd want to get away from that contract.
I could see it. I think it's going to be interesting. I wonder, like, if the Flyers try to eat any money on Risto. I know it's for
Yeah.
5 years. Maybe they eat $1 million and they get a first rounder
How
back.
many
Like,
does he have left?
it was a 5 year deal, so I think he might be at four now left on it. I think it started this season.
No, he got two.
Oh,
After
two.
after this year, he's got. Oh no, I'm sorry, three. Three
Okay.
after this year.
Okay, so that's not
Read that wrong.
crazy. I thought it was four. So that's three makes it a lot better, obviously. But
Yeah,
I think the Flyers, I don't know if teams are going to buy in for 3 years, but they might. He's not a rental. It's not like it's too much.
yeah,
Maybe teams you target are potentially the Leafs. They're always looking for defensemen of Risto's ilk.
yeah,
Maybe the Flyers can cash in on that type of defenseman because, once Chris Tanev gets removed from this trade bait board and this trade bait list, there's not really too many
right.
defensemen that have that rough and tough kind of edge to them like Aristolainen, and we know how much GMs really covet that
Yeah,
going into the playoffs. So it'll be interesting. I think if they can't trade Risto, though,
they'll
probably
move
Walker
Walker.
gets dealt.
Yeah, I think
And
so too.
the asking price is a first rounder there, which makes sense based off the way he played. I have some more insight just on Scott Lawton. Obviously rumored, in trade talks by Darren Dreger over the All-Star weekend. Apparently the Flyers believe, or they're looking for a first rounder for Lawton, which makes sense. It's similar to kind of what we've heard over, the last summer and at last year's draft. Anthony DeMarco from the fourth period tweeted out earlier today about Scott Lawton, and he essentially said that he spoke to two other teams over the weekend, and both teams said that a first round pick is the right ask for Scott Lawton. Between him not being a rental and on a good contract, a first for Lawton, according to these executives, is par for the course. And the Barclay Goodrow 2020 return is what Philly will likely leverage, and he wasn't a rental. So there's, I guess, past trades like that Goodrow trade that the Flyers kind of look at and say, hey, look what he went for, similar player to Lawton. If you want him, this is what it's going to
Yeah,
take. And I think the Flyers have all the leverage because, like Anthony said in his tweet, it's not like he's going to be a rental here, right? You're going to get him with more years on the contract and not just for one playoff run. So I think the Flyers,
I think it's
you know,
definitely doable.
yeah, I think with the signing of Ryan Paling could make Lawton expendable. Obviously, we'll see,
And with
but
Noah Cates being
and
here.
Cates, yeah, it's going to be really fascinating, I think, to see what happens with Lawton going up to the deadline. And one other kind of trade deadline related piece of news, well, not really news, but more of a quote from John Tortorella, just kind of on uh, where the team's headed, kind of going into the deadline and just the final 32 games. So I'll read this out here. Um, so Tortorella stated, we're kind of in a situation that a lot of people didn't think we would be in. We're starting our last 32 games here, the last start of the season, and we're looking to try to do the things we want to do to get where we want to be. But also, we're not backing off at all as far as what we're trying to do with the organization, the big picture too, as far as rebuilding. I think some people that have watched us play, have watched a number of our players play. I think there'll be some questions to Danny on them. I think there'll be some conversations with Danny as far as what about this guy and that guy. Those are questions we have to take, we have to listen to. And I don't want to speak out of turn with Danny, but it's a situation where it's a really good asset that comes back. It's going to happen. We can't lose sight of what we're doing here. But on the other side of that, we're trying to win every goddamn game we play. We've lost our last 5. I think it's very important that we get our energy back, our swagger back, both offensively and defensively, to start these last 32 games and try to find a way. That is paramount as far as the coaching staff. The other stuff that comes around when you get near the deadline, you see deals are being made now. Those are things that the organization will listen to. I'm sure I have discussions. If it's the proper asset that's coming back and we're going to lose one of the players that are a big part of this thing and building this right now and where we are this season, there will be no hesitation. So I just wanted to read that essentially to preface the fact that the Flyers are going to pretty much listen on everybody here, right? Like if it makes sense for them in the future to trade them, they likely might trade them. And that's based on what Tortorella is saying. Obviously, they don't want to trade certain guys if they're in the playoff mix or really right there on the bubble. But I think depending on, like Tortorella said, if the asset is just too good to be true and teams are overpaying for guys, they're not going to hesitate because they realize like this isn't a cup winning team right now. So it's a smart philosophy to take it because I think the Flyers at least know that, hey, we might as well look to the future instead and try to maximize our asses with some of these guys if other teams do plan to overpay. So
Right. And I think the Flyers, again, having all the leverage, they could pull that off. And I think there's several names, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. Any guy who's around 30 should be open to the fact that he could be traded. Especially the 29 and up, crew.
it's just the reality of the situation
Yeah.
that they're in, right?
I don't think Sean Couturier is getting traded. He's got a huge contract.
Personally,
And
I think he's the next captain, but
yeah, I plus I think they love him, and he's a lot harder to replace than a Scott Lawton. But guys like, again, when you have other guys who can do Lawton's role, maybe they'll miss out on some stuff. They'll miss out on his leadership and stuff like that. But they need more of that top 6 talent than they do the bottom 6. And they have a bunch of young guys who could step into the bottom 6 roles too, especially the way Tortorella coaches and how he gets the most out of players. So, I don't know. I think they absolutely have to be open to it. All right. I just want to remind everybody to please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify and iTunes. Give us a rating there and a follow there. All of that is tremendously helpful to us. We thank you for all of your support. All right, let's get into our Phantoms update. We'll do prospect updates, and then we'll call it. So, Phantoms, I got 2 topics. The first one is something I've been thinking about, especially because we're talking about the trade deadline and players leaving town, like maybe Scott Lawton. Wade Allison has been heating up a little bit. He had a goal and assist the other night. He's starting to put up points again. Again, this is a player who probably should be in the NHL to some degree. It was shocking that he wasn't. It was shocking that nobody took him. So his game kind of fell apart in that time period, so he's kind of a rehab. But, the question is, and I want to see what your thoughts on this, Vasili, is do you think Wade Allison will get another shot, especially if they move some bodies here at the trade deadline? Because I don't think the Flyers are going to be rushing to call up Samu Tuomala, even though he's played exceptional. Allison has much more NHL experience and was on the precipice of being an NHL player here. And then you look at Bobby Brink, what is his road back to the NHL? Are they going to want to disrupt him if he's having a good AHL season, especially if he's not going to be playing, in a top 9 spot or on the power play? Where Wade Allison is a guy you could have as a 13th forward. He's a guy who you could sit out a little bit, so you could get watching in the press box. You're not really losing too much on his development. What do you think about Allison and his potential to actually getting an NHL call up?
I think it's a possibility, and more for the fact uh, that there's more flexibility with how you can use Allison, in a sense that, like you said, right? Like you could scratch him and don't really have to be worried about his development as much. You could probably put him in a fourth line role if you needed to. I don't think they want to get him in the top nine, but I mean, anything can happen. But I think if you want to bring Brink back up specifically, the reason why they sent him down is those reasons, but kind of reversed. You can't play him in a fourth line role. You don't want to
Right.
scratch him. You want him to be in a top nine role, but there might not be the right situation for him in that role right now at the NHL level. So that's where I think Allison gets potentially a chance if some guys are moved, like a lot and things
That's
like
what I
that,
was
or if
thinking.
there's any injuries. The only thing that I would caveat with Allison is I know he went down to the AHL and had a bad attitude at that point when it happened. Didn't take it well, take
Well,
the demotion well. So that could be a factor. Who knows how the team is receptive to that? I'm not sure if he's turned it around at this point after that initial send down, but that's always something you have to kind of
so
look at because teams will monitor that, right? And monitor how a guy responds. So,
I do want to add a slight correction. And again, I forget where I heard this, but from what I understand, I think this was listening to Bob Roadtruck on PHY, or I forget, Charlie O'Connor and Bill Matz's podcast when they interviewed him. I think that was corrected a little bit, and even Lappy came out and said like, well, it's not necessarily a bad attitude. He was just kind of sulking a little bit, like he was down more
yeah.
than it was like him having an attitude. Because from what I understand, like it is not the case right now. Like
Okay, that's good.
he is into it. Like he is fully engaged in with the Phantoms. And I think every player deserves a redemption. This is a guy that we were all really high on. This is a former second round pick. He showed really good NHL flashes. He plays a physical game. Um, so I agree with what you're saying, but I wonder if maybe we overblew that a little bit from
It's
our
definitely possible.
assumptions
Like
from the beginning of the season, because I made the same assumption, right?
yeah, I'm not as close to the situation, so
Same.
take Bob's word for it and LaPerrie's word for it. My only thing with him is I do know Tortorella's not the biggest fan. So that's also a
Right.
factor too, right? Like I would think if Torch had his choice, he would bring Brink up probably again before Allison, is my thought.
I think that's very fair. I think that's a great point. But I do look at somebody like Ule Lixel, right? Who he likes. He's shown some flashes, but Lixel's also not playing,
Yeah.
and he didn't love the way Frost played, and he didn't love Scott Hartnell at one point. It's like he is a guy, for all of his stubbornness, he is a guy who's open for redemption. And if Allison gets another taste, you never know about what that does. Like
Yeah,
maybe
especially if he
he
plays well, right? He could make
that's
an
what I'm saying.
impression.
He's gonna come in with like, hey, like maybe he's not even getting re-signed. He's an RFA. Maybe he's walks anyway, right? And that they don't re-sign him. I think chances are high on that. But it's an opportunity for him, and I think if he gets a taste of it again, you never know what he could show here at the end of the season, and it might be an option for the Flyers. Maybe they were wrong on him in the end, right? But I don't think that's going to happen. But it is an opportunity for him. He could bring a lot of energy. He was an energy player. We didn't necessarily look at Allison as this like throwaway player, right? Like nobody thought of him like that until it got to this point this season. But last season, we were not thinking that. We were all thinking he would get taken going through waivers. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
definitely.
I just believe in second chances, and I like Lixell. He's a little bit younger. And I just look at Allison, the fact he's been heating up. Like he put up no points in the beginning, and he's been slowly crawling up. He's got 9 goals in the AHL. And he's slowly been crawling up their statistical the
Leaderboard.
stat yeah, the leaderboards, thank you, on the team. So he has improved, and I think a lot of times that's what you look from a guy. And again, he's 26 years old. He's not really going to develop too much more beyond what he is right now, but maybe he has some value if there are bodies moved. If there are no body moved, let's be honest, I can't see it happening, right? Like
No,
they're
yeah, it's
already
only if
sitting
there's
Delorier.
it's only if there's trades, right? Like they're already playing 11-7. I think they would much probably rather go 11-7 down the line here. Obviously it depends on all the trades though, so we'll see
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happens.
That's the only reason I would think that it could happen if Scott Lawton moves. and that 13th forward spot opens up. Right now they're rolling 7 defensemen. I actually looked last night, and I have not seen this often, but the ice time leader overall for the team was Travis Konechny with 22 minutes,
Interesting.
and no defenseman broke 20 minutes.
Well, you have so many to use at once, so that you can spread it out, which is it could be a benefit down the stretch, right? Keep fresh legs on some of these guys, and if you look at it too with Risto kind of getting a bigger piece of the pie, he was kind of playing more of a third pair role when he came back from his injury, so I think they can definitely feed Risto a lot more minutes than he
He
was
was second
taking.
on he was second on the D in
Yeah,
minutes,
that
and
makes
then
sense.
York and Drysdale were both 17 minutes.
That'll be an
Uh,
interesting pair. Interesting to see
Sealer
what they
was
do
15
together.
plus and Zamula was 14 plus. So evenly distributed. I mean, overall,
Yeah.
really, I like what he's doing there. It's just I don't know how long you're going to roll with 7 defensemen for. I that's where I completely agreed with what you said about Risto. That if they don't move Risto, they're moving Walker. I think that's you have to kind of make a decision there. You can't continue to roll 7 defensemen all season
Yeah, it's
long.
not going to
They're
work for the rest of the
technically
season.
eight defensemen. So yeah. But I will say this, like I agree with Tort's assessment. Like Drysdale is not ready for like a permanent top pairing role. He has not been with this team. He has not learned this team's system that well yet. Like if he was here all year, I think we'd be seeing a very different player at this point. But this is a player that missed the beginning of the season with contract negotiations. He missed a bunch of time with injuries. He's gonna take time. Like I would
Definitely
really
getting accustomed still.
yeah, I would hold your reservations of this player until next season. Like understanding who Tortorella is, understanding what his offseason needs to be like, and then coming in. Like Drysdale for me is next year and beyond as far as my real assessment of him. Right now, I see the high upside. All that is very evident to me, and the skill is clearly there, and I expect him to get better, but he's not necessarily ready. He's not where York is. He's also younger than York. He's the youngest of the defensemen. So, all that kind of combined, it's like I don't think the Flyers are rushing to get Drysdale in 23 minutes a night, right? I guess they can always, if they do move Walker, they can always roll the York Sanheim pairing once again, which they haven't done for a while. And then go like Zamula, Risto, Sealer, Drysdale.
They have a lot of options, and a lot of these
Yeah.
guys have been playing together in different pairings too. So I think, I mean, at
He's
least
getting
with this,
used to it.
yeah, with the 7 defensemen, right? Like you're always rotating that one guy in. So like to your point, they are getting used to playing with different partners.
Yeah. This season's been wild. Yeah, so the Bobby Brink thing, we talked about his possible road to the NHL. I suspect that he probably won't be back unless it looks completely out of place in the AHL or the
Or
Flyers
if
have
there's
some
an
kind of
injury, yeah,
significant injury. The one thing I do see is if the Phantoms don't make the playoffs and the Flyers make the playoffs, he's definitely getting called up.
yeah, he'll be a
He'll
black, he'll
be
be a
with
black ace, yeah.
100%, 100%. He's going to be in that group and potentially starting in the playoffs as well. Um, I don't think that Tortorella has like lost favor on the kid.
No,
I think they made an organizational decision to be like, hey, this kid's still pretty young. This was my whole thing to be in the beginning of the year where they had Brink and in my opinion, I was kind of right about it. Like they had Brink and Forrester, they had Sandstrom and Airson, where I'm like, you don't do that.
one or the other, yeah.
Yeah, like one or the other. Don't force it. Don't get guys benched that don't need to be benched right now. It all worked out in the end, just mostly. But at least Brink has shown what he can do. Um,
I
but
think
yeah,
for Brink, it's just mostly ice time related, right? Like they weren't playing him
right,
enough at the
exactly.
NHL. They just wanted to make sure that he could play. And I mean, he's playing in the top line role in the A, and he's got 4 points in 5 games. So obviously he's feeling it down there. Three of or 3 goals in the 5 games as well. Out of the 5 or out of the 4 points. So he's obviously playing well to start. I think if he absolutely tears it up, like, and is almost like at a goal a game pace, maybe they think about bringing him back up, especially if down the stretch you see them lack any goal scoring ability for
Yeah.
like a prolonged period, maybe, especially if he's ripping it up. But like you said, like unless there's an injury, I wouldn't really expect it, or unless they trade multiple forwards for some reason.
Well, that's why I thought of Allison, because I'm like, with Brink, you're not what they really want from Allison is what Tortorella, or I'm sorry, from Brink is what Tortorella criticized publicly, which was the ability to check, right?
Yeah.
It's like the little details of the game, which is what they really want him to work on, not so much the offensive side that they know he can do in the NHL. It's and this is, I think he's going to have a huge year next year, to be honest with you. I think the development track that he's on, if he can refine these elements of his game, even like 10, 20,
Yeah.
30%, going into next season, he's an NHL regular. Like I don't like he's
Well, you got to
on a
think he
bad
had
team, he's probably in the NHL.
18 points in 38 games, and a
That's
lot of
really
those
good.
games he was getting limited minutes, like
Yeah.
8 minutes, 9 minutes, like playing on the fourth
He's got
line.
top six upside, in my opinion, just like Forrester. Like
I agree.
he
Yeah.
really does. Um I do wonder if Cam Atkinson that they're trying to move him to.
I,
You know what I mean?
See, with Atkinson, I think it's more an off-season thing.
Yeah, potentially. But
And
those
that's just,
conversations might be started now.
yeah, exactly. You plant the seed saying, hey, he's available, and maybe something happens at the draft. I just think for him, it's off-season, just with the contract and the
Because
cap hit.
that's where Brink can walk in.
Yeah, take his spot essentially.
It's like
Well,
literally such a similar in size, similar in skill set.
yeah, I think for Atkinson, probably off-season just because of the cap
Yeah, I think
stuff.
so too.
So
I think so too. Maybe even not that. Maybe it's more of next year's trade deadline. But
that too as a rental. Yeah.
right, exactly. But again, we don't know where this team's going to be next year. We don't even know if Michkov is not coming here. Like we can assume he's not coming here, but
We'll see what happens when it
we'll
happens.
see
Yeah.
what happens. Exactly. All right, let's go into our prospect update. So I do want to mention Michkov real quick. He had just a sweet breakaway goal the other night. Walked away with a goal and assist. He had 12 shots on goal. Let me say that again. 12 shots on
Likes
goal
to
in that
shoot the
game.
puck, eh? But that move that he made to go 5-hole there was really
Filthy.
sweet and
Yeah.
reminded me of
Smooth.
Kucherov.
Yeah.
So that just
That
shows
is
the kind of
that
skill that he has. So
that does seem like his most comparable player as far as the NHL, from what I can tell, is a Kucherov like player who, again, knock on wood, don't want to put the pressure on him. That is on a higher projection than Kucherov. I don't
yeah,
know if that's actually going to happen. Again, Kucherov is exceptional. I think he's second in the league in points over the
yeah,
past few
behind
years,
McKinnon.
behind McKinnon or McDavid.
Well, McDavid, I was saying second in the league in points this season behind McKinnon.
Okay, yeah. So again, but this is what we expect from Michkov off of what he's done is this top five in the league type of player in points. And again, he is. I still stand by the fact. Like I think I was talking to Dan Knightley on Twitter, and he like reposted somebody where it was like, "Oh, the KHL, this is like blown out of proportion." Yeah, he projects to be a star player, but not generational. I don't know what people are watching. This is why it bothers me that Russia is not able to compete, because I'm like, if Russia was competing, no one would be saying that
Yeah,
Michkov does not project to be
especially
generational.
if he's ripping up and putting up like 20 points at the World Juniors, which he
He
probably would have done.
he
So
would have made Celebrini look like a not second class, because obviously Celebrini looks exceptional, but he would have made Celebrini look like that lower tier of
compared
prospect
to him,
in
yeah.
comparison to him. And I really it's hard for people to like Demidov right now, who is younger, is not on the same track that Michkov is right now. Like
No.
Michkov is a .9 points per game for a horrible team in the KHL.
Yeah, so he has 35 points right now in 39 games, 15 goals and 20 assists. And you have to factor in he played a couple of those games with Ska and got like no minutes and got benched. So it's really close, like to you said, like a point a game. And also he had pneumonia for the last like month and a half. So he missed a ton of games. So what would his points percentage be and what would the points per game be, if he was actually playing
He
over
was
the
playing
last
with
month?
pneumonia.
Yeah, he played a couple games with, then came back out and back into the lineup. So he was struggling with it a bit. But yeah, in terms of like the
You would
KHL,
expect.
in terms of the KHL, like being touted as a league that we shouldn't look at those stats and he's not generational. Like I call a lot of bullshit on that. Just look at all the really good players that have come into the KHL in the past, 10 years, like Kucherov, Buchnevich, like Tarasenko, obviously before, 10 years ago, but like just so many really good superstars have come out of that league over the years. So just to say that, I don't know. I
And
can't really agree with that. I have a really, really interesting stat. This is
sure.
from Byron Bader on Michkov. Um, he does a lot of like comparison like cards and like full comp cards. So like those cards of like players that you'll see and like who do they compare to. So that's just like a bit of background on who he is, but he's awesome. So shout out to him on Twitter there. But four of the last five drafted forwards since 2000 to hit a 65 point equivalency in the KHL by their draft plus two season have turned into stars in the NHL. So Malkin, Tarasenko, Kuznetsov, Kaprizov. Filatov is the only one, so that's the key to Filatov, that did not become a star in the NHL. Danila Yurov and Matvey Michkov will be the sixth and seventh forwards to meet those parameters of a 65 plus point equivalency in the KHL by their draft plus two season. So if you look at that, the stats kind of point to just where their production is in the KHL. More often than not, you're becoming a star, right? Like 4 out of 5 players who have that type of production. If you look at it, right? Like Malkin,
All you
Tarasenko,
have to do is
Kuznetsov,
watch
Kaprizov,
Michkov, though.
Filatov. Yeah, exactly. That too, right? But like 4 of those guys with the same production turn out to be like some of the best players in the NHL over the last decade here, right? So like if you look at that and just where they're, Michkov's trending with the points, like it's pretty obvious to see where he's going to land as well. And just look at his play. And if you look at the card that Bader posted on that tweet, like Michkov's full NHL comp probabilities are Wayne Gretzky, Connor McDavid, Connor Bedard. So yeah,
That again,
those are his
if he
comparisons.
was playing in these tournaments, that I think that people would be talking about him versus Bedard.
Yeah, it'd be
That
like
would
an
be the
Ovechkin
conversation.
versus Crosby situation,
That would
essentially.
be the reports out there. But because of this whole political nonsense, we're
He's
not
not getting
having
the
those
same
conversations.
pedigree. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not having those competitions. Again, he outperformed Bedard in the
Yeah,
tournament they played
at the
together.
Hlinka Gretzky outscored him. Yeah,
Think about that.
it's
He out
definitely
Imagine there was a player that outperformed McDavid.
yeah, exactly. Right?
Like
It's the
how
same type of
people would
thing.
talk about him. Think
Yeah, they
about how
talk
people talked about Matthews, who's I don't know if he's
generational.
he's like borderline generational.
I would say he's generational goal scorer.
Yes, he's an all world class goal scorer. He is one of the best players in the league. And again, that's where I think Michkov is. You got to prove to be generational. All we say he's on a generational track, but he is not yet
He's not
generational.
showing me anything that would, say otherwise at this point.
Right.
But it's obviously going to come down to when he gets here, what he
Of
does.
course.
But
Yes.
if he gets here and he's, Kirill Kaprizov essentially,
Great.
then, your
You got a star player.
yeah, your estimations were pretty on point with what
Yeah.
he was looking like in the KHL. So
That's what we see. We see like his floor is an all-star.
yeah.
And his ceiling is a generational talent where somebody like Gauthier, his floor is, I don't know, let's just say third line goal scorer. His ceiling is an all-star.
Yeah, first line winger. Yeah.
Yeah, first line player, 80 points in the league. Great player, but his ceiling is not top 5 in points in the league.
Yeah, whereas Mitchkov, I'd say his ceiling's like 70, 80 points or point per game, and his or floor 70, 80 points point per game, and his ceiling is like 120 points or something.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly how I see Michkov. So at worst, if we just get a point per game player, okay, I'm happy with it. A little disappointed it's not generational, but I'm not going to cry over an all-star. You know what I mean?
yeah, exactly.
All right. And the next one I have on the list is Kolosov. So I did bring up Zavragin earlier. Kolosov. So the reason I wanted to mention this is that his season is almost over. Like the KHL season does not span the entire length of the NHL season. And I look at the fact that his contract, while he is loaned out, he's under contract by the Flyers.
Yeah.
Flyers do need another goaltender right now. And they do have a spot available in the AHL. Like Gahagan doesn't have to be playing backup to Sandstrom. Do you
Interesting.
do you think, and I look at the available cap space, right? And the roster spot that's open, is there a chance that Kolosov comes over now, not to play in the NHL with Erson? I don't think they're going to jump to get him, but it would be a kind of advantageous position to bring him over, give him a taste now because he's been playing against men anyway in men's league,
Hmm.
and maybe he is your backup next year if he can get some games in the AHL this year and get ready. Maybe he's your backup by the end of next season, right? You start off with Pedersen. Pedersen, maybe by the end doesn't, revitalize his career. And then you go with a young goalie tandem in Kolosov and Erson, assuming Kolosov does well. What do you think about that possibility?
I think that's a really interesting point to bring up. Obviously, yeah, the KHL season starts, end of August, early September, so it's a bit ahead of where the NHL's
Hmm.
at. So there's going to be some time here where the NHL season will overlap and still be running. So I wonder if the Flyers do think about it and they say to themselves, "Hey, we get him in the AHL."
He's under
And
contract.
yeah, they can, right? Technically. So they get him in the AHL and you lose that little period essentially where next season he's going to need to acclimate himself to the North American ice, right? So you can kind of
Yeah.
get that out of the way early. So that's actually something really interesting. I mean, I don't know if they'll do it. I don't know if there's anything in the loan agreement specifically that might stop that. For like, let's say you played this season and were loaned out. Are you able now that
I
you are
don't know
loaned out to
either.
come back over? I don't know. But if it is an actual possibility, and just looking at the Flyers goaltending depth, like let's say Sandstrom gets hurt or Pedersen gets hurt, and then you're in a shit out of luck type of situation. If you do have him under contract and you can bring him, then I don't see why they wouldn't. Because with a guy who's playing against men in the KHL, he can at least arguably hold his own in the AHL if you need
Right.
to go there.
That's
So
exactly that's exactly what I was thinking. He's already played against men. He's already in the midst of his season. Why not if you can?
yeah.
It's a little different if you have four professional goaltenders, but you have three right now.
Yeah. And
At
if there's
least high
injuries, you might be
level.
desperate. So
Right,
who
exactly. And
knows?
and again, with Sandstrom still being here, you don't have to even make him the starter. You can give him, just a handful of games just to give him a taste of the AHL game. He's been a very good goalie over in the
That's
KHL. So
yeah, it's really interesting point. Like I'm kind of just I kind of want to see what happens now and what
right.
unfolds that situation. But yeah, Kolosov, I mean, he's been really good. He actually had a shutout on February 4th. It was his fourth shutout of the season. In the K right now, he has a 907 save percentage. He's 18 4-4 in the KHL. And actually since a 3 game break that he had earlier at the end of January, he's gone 6-3 since that break and has a 923 save percentage. So those stats are courtesy of Alex Appleyard. Always great stuff on Twitter, so
Yeah.
give him a follow, especially with the European stuff. But yeah, like it just shows, right? Like Kolosov has been one of the better goalies in the KHL this season. So I think the upside's definitely there. And if you can kind of get the early track of the development in terms of the North American game, with getting him acclimated to that North American ice, why not try to pull that off? And then next season, it's an even easier transition to being a full time goalie, either in the AHL or NHL. So
Yeah. Yeah. I I I think it would also be a really nice thing for the fans, right?
yeah,
You just lost Carter Hart. Everybody who's at least really tied in with this team has heard the name Kolosov. It kind of brings a little more hope. It,
here's this new exciting goalie to
right.
get
Who
hyped up about essentially.
who is on a projection that is similar to Shesterkin
Yeah,
and Sorokin
yeah.
to show people, hey, we might have lost Hart, but look at all the other guys we have available. And again, they could wait till next season too. I don't think the Flyers are trying to rush anything, but and they don't have to. But again, if he's already under contract and the team is not using him anymore and his season is over, why not get him into more games? Why
Especially if
not
you
get him
need a
over here?
goalie, like if somebody
Get
gets
him learning
hurt, right?
English.
Like let's say so I just look at it the injury situation. Like you never know what's gonna happen. If a goalie gets hurt, then you're really kind of screwed. So that I think maybe might be the thing that who knows could force their hand if it happens. But
Yeah.
see.
So the next player I have, or like the last player I have on this list, because we already mentioned a couple of prospects already, but Santeri Sulku. Now we haven't talked about him at all, and I actually didn't realize this. So this is another shout out to Alexander Appleyard. So Santeri Sulco had a great game yesterday, was traveling, so did not update on it. This is per him. I'm reading his tweet directly here. His third hat trick of the season in game number 26. He's got 16 goals, 6 assists, 22 points in 26 games. And he's playing for Mestis, the same team that
In the Mestis League.
oh, in the Mestis League.
I
I'm
guess
sorry.
it's a league. I thought it was a team earlier,
No,
but
no, no, yeah, yeah. Sorry. He was playing in the Mestis League for Hermes. So it's the same league that Tuamala played in. He's also plus 15 in that league. Again, this is a former, he's got 21 points in his last 20 games. So this is a former seventh round pick, a guy that I kind of ignored,
yeah, me
quite
too.
frankly. I didn't realize that this was happening with this kid. So I just thought it was really interesting. I don't know what could happen, but if he continues doing what he's doing, I imagine the Flyers will want to bring him over
Yeah.
somewhat in the near future. I think he's only 19 years old.
Yeah, he's still really young. They picked him the 2022 NHL draft
Right.
round 7. So the Flyers, man, they
He's six
just
four, by the way.
yeah, they seem to just keep picking like these kind of guys that you look at and they're have really good production in their junior league and they could be diamonds in the rough or steals, right? So, kudos to the drafting staff because they're obviously doing a good job.
And he'll be
A
20
guy,
next year.
yeah, a guy
So
that I mean, even Gendron is kind of almost a similar ilk. Obviously, there's more pedigree there with him, and we think there could be more upside with Gendron than a Sulku, but it's almost similar. Like he's a seventh round pick too, so Flyers getting some value here, other late round picks. It looks like, which is obviously beneficial.
yeah. And Gendron has 10 goals in 10 games,
Yeah, lighting
16
up the
points.
queue, which is not
Yeah.
really surprising there.
Yeah, and Denver Barkey is not even come close to slowing down. He's got 26 goals, 45 assists, excuse me, in 45 games at 71 points at a
Yeah, I think teams might
1.58.
have. I think the size really might have, you know, given teams the wrong idea because, like, when I went back to the draft and looked at like Craig Button's rankings, Bob McKenzie's rankings, like they had him as a second round guy,
And
like
Steve
top
had him at a
top
first as a first
70.
round guy.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So like to see that he dropped, was he third or fourth round for the
Third.
Flyers? Yeah, like I think the Flyers might have got a steal with him for
I
sure.
think it was actually. Let me double check. I just want to make sure. Um, yeah, third round pick, 95th overall.
Yeah, that's
So
what I mean. Like a lot of people projected him to go a lot higher, so it's just strange, but that's how the draft works, right? Some teams, some scouts, they fall in love with certain players. It ends up leading to other guys falling and
I
teams
mean,
taking advantage. So
he's having a first round pick like draft plus 1 year,
yes, he is.
right? So very similar to Morgan Frost, who wasn't a point per game player in his draft year. He was a rising player in the draft. Flyers took him. He exploded the following year, put up over 100 points. Now Barkey's on that same track. And look, say what you will about Frost, but people forget when they talk about him because he was putting up so many points. This is a late first round pick. So the fact he's already playing in the NHL, he's contributing. He put up a good amount of points last season. That's already a successful first round pick. You might not like that. He might not be your favorite player for whatever reason. That is already a success.
Yeah.
The fact is, you took a guy late in the first round, and you look at the fact that they got Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost for Braden Shen, and I still believe that Joel Farabee projects to be better than Braden Shen. And we're seeing it this year, in my opinion. I think we're seeing a rising star in the league in Farabee, which
I
is
agree.
how
Yeah.
I projected him.
Those 5-on-5 points, he's, top 5 essentially in the league in that.
I
So
think he's still second behind McDavid, isn't he?
yeah, if he's
I
not
think they brought
second,
it up during the game last night, if I
if
remember.
he's not second, he's top 500%.
I'm
So
pretty
yeah.
sure they brought it up that he's second last night in the league. Though we brought it up here first. Vasili brought it up here first. Remember that. Um,
But yeah, for Barkey too, I think like if you look at his playoff stats last year, he had 24 points in 20 games in the playoffs going into the Memorial Cup, and then London loses. So I'm interested too to just see that playoff production if that continues.
I
Like,
mean,
I mean, you see a guy that can produce like that in the playoffs at the most crucial times. It's a really good sign. London's going to be hungry to win that Memorial Cup. They went to the finals last year and lost, so
yeah.
that'll be a team to keep an eye on there.
And then there's Oliver Bonk, who is just
Ripping it up as well in London.
completely hit another level. I mean, in 41 games, he's got 18 goals, 36 assists, 54 points. He is way over a point a game at this point. I don't know what to make of this kid anymore. I really don't. Like I know I've been told he doesn't have offensive upside. What he's doing shows that he does. So until like I hate scouting reports outside of like I love Steve's thing, but I hate this whole like Steve called him a potential top pairing. Remember that? Like he didn't call him a second pairing defenseman. That's people here who called him that. But like when I see these type of numbers in a draft plus 1 year, the fact he was selected for Canada was one of their better defensemen. Like
Yeah.
I see a potential guy who has a two-way game. Like it's not normal for a defensive defenseman to have 18 goals in 41 games.
Yeah, he might not be like Cale Makar offensively, but like, is he going to be, a guy that can maybe get you like 35, 40 points in the
10,
NHL?
10 goals, 30
Yeah,
assists.
and be like really solid defensively. That's very valuable, right? So,
That's top pairing. That's top pairing defenseman in the
exactly.
NHL.
Yeah.
Like most defensemen do not put up, 60, 70 points in the league, 100 points. Like that's a complete outlier.
Mhm.
Even if you look at a lot of the top defensemen around the league who play against the best players in the league, they're not putting up these type of points and they're still exceptional defensemen. So I don't know. I just look, I don't want to put too much on Bonk, but this is just shocking me. And he's not slowing down at all. In fact, it's the opposite. He's speeding up offensively. Like I don't know what kind of points he's going to finish with at the end of the season. It's about a 65 game season in the OHL, I think, something like that, 65 to 70 games.
65 games, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. He had 67 games last year, so I think it might be maybe it's 70 games. I don't remember. But again, he's on pace for 25 goals.
Yeah,
You know
he's
what I mean?
playing really, really well. I think, you just got to wait and see with him. In
He's
terms of
only
the NHL
he's
upside, still
18
very young. So,
or he's 19.
yeah,
He's
really, really
nine
young.
turned just turned 19 in January. Like I don't know. I look at that type of production. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna scoff at that.
Yeah. So
You know,
OHL regular season 68 games, so close enough.
68. Okay, yeah. Well, he won't play 68 games because of the World Junior Championship, but
Still, he's gonna be well over a point a game, so
yeah,
that's impressive.
I'm impressed by it. All right, dude, that was a good episode. Let's call it. It actually went a lot longer than I anticipated. I thought it would be a shorter episode, and clearly I was wrong.
When do we ever
Uh,
do those, Yariv?
yeah, yeah. When maybe when we first started. Anything you want to leave our audience with?
No, just gonna continue to have articles up on Flyers Nitty Gritty throughout the rest of the season and the stretch drive. And we'll continue to have content on the site. So just stick with us, and we'll bring you home here to the end of the regular season.
Yeah, well said. Again, want to remind everybody, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for notifications. Follow us on Spotify and iTunes. Again, follow Vasili and I on Twitter. I barely tweet anymore, but Vasili's on there. He's really active. And follow Flyers Nitty Gritty as well. And follow Jamie Bascal as well. He's got considerably more followers than us, but he's very good at the social media thing. So give him credit for that. And yeah, just want to give a shout out to our sponsors again, Jim Stakes at 4th and South and Public Summit Adjusters. You can reach them at 215-752-0560. Again, thank you all for listening. Thank you for keeping the subscribers up, and we really appreciate it. And like Vasili said, we're going to keep this going, and hopefully we have a win streak to talk about next time we come on here. And yeah, we love you guys, and remember, always stay great.